thank you all for coming. We appreciate your being here, and Jan, thank you for leading this. Jan is the founder and president CEO. I don't know what your correct title is, but runs Meetings by Design, and we have worked with Jan for several years. In particular, this last year, our annual conference, and those of you that attended it was
so good.
Just very well.
Okay.
And thank you, Jan, for that. But there were so many aspects of that that came out that I wouldn't have thought of in virtual conferences and virtual meetings, and Jan just handled them all well. So I will turn it over to you, Jan. Thank you for leading this.
Absolutely, and thank you, Paul, and everyone. Welcome today. So virtual events are now a way of life, and it feels like these are going to be a way of life for quite a while now. So let's dive into what things you should be thinking about for it. My goal is for you to come away with tools and ideas on how and when and where to begin a virtual event, because the process is actually pretty different. How you choose a platform of the literally thousands that are out there now, and some things we are learning along the way that we are calling production tips, tricks, and uh-ohs. So before we dive in, just a quick background for you, for those who don't know me. I'm president of Meetings by Design. We're a Delaware-based business meetings and special events company. We've had the privilege of being in business for more than 25 years, and some of the highlight programs over that time is actually we have produced the DuPont Martin Luther King Jr. celebration every year. We've also had the honor of doing both Governor Markell's and Governor Carney's inaugural balls, as well as the 375th Jubilee Gala of Delaware. And that included Their Majesties, the King and Queen of Sweden, Speaker of Parliament of Finland, as well as Vice President Biden and the federal delegation. Can you say protocol and security out the ears? But we do a range of events that range in sizes from 24 to more than 5,000. I'm also happily married to my dearest friend and business partner, Michael, and am proudly called Mom by our son, Ethan. When we're not producing events, we enjoy theater, hiking, travel, and American Revolution reenacting, just to keep it a little bit different. So you know a little bit about me, since we have a slightly smaller group, rather than doing polls, if you just wouldn't mind saying who you are and your role with your organization, please, so we understand who's better on the line. Carolyn, could I trouble you to go first, perhaps?
Sure. I'm Carolyn. I'm the president and CEO of the Modern Maturity Center in Dover.
Welcome. Jen?
Thank you.
Hi, I am the co-founder and marketing director of BrandSwan, which is a branding and marketing agency that works with nonprofits and small businesses.
Lovely. Kristen?
Hi, I'm the deputy director for the Delaware Division
Oh, honey, you froze. Try again.
of the Arts, and I, among other things, manage all of our big events.
Okay. Lisa?
I'm executive director and founder of Art Therapy Express.
Okay. Ariana, hey stranger, how you doing? It's Delaware, of course. You got to know somebody that's on the call, right?
It's so good to see you, Jan. Thank you for doing this. My name is
Absolutely.
Ariana Langford, and I'm the board president for the Delaware Alliance Against Sexual Violence.
Okay. Theonda, did I pronounce that right?
Yes, thank you. Theonda Manzara. I'm the founder and CEO of Healthy Foods for Healthy Kids. We work with schools to start vegetable gardening programs.
Lovely.
Thank you.
And Russ?
Hi, Russ Epswell, Vice President and CEO of Milford Housing Development Corporation, a statewide nonprofit affordable housing developer.
Great. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your time today. I also would love this to be as interactive as we can make it. So if you have an idea, a question, or a comment, just please unmute yourself and ask. It's a little hard for me to look at my notes and look at the chat simultaneously. And I really would like to talk about what you want to talk about.
Hey, Jan, I think there are a couple of other folks, Liz Lyons, Regina Dodds,
Okay.
Susan Davis. Did we miss them?
I did not see them. I do apologize. So I did not see their names. Who else is on the line, please?
Liz?
Hi, I'm Liz Lyons. I'm the development director at the Epilepsy Foundation of Delaware.
Wonderful. Anyone
And
else I missed? I
Regina?
apologize.
Good morning, everyone. It's Regina Dodds. I'm the Director of Events for Meals on Wheels Delaware.
And Susan Davis.
Good morning. I'm Susan Davis with Milford Housing also, and I am the Resource Development Specialist.
Lovely. Thank you, Paul. For some reason, didn't see the faces, so I missed that. I appreciate that. So events for nonprofits, for actually anyone, are a fact of life. And just because we're in COVID doesn't mean events have stopped, but how we need to approach them is completely different. So virtual or live, the place we always recommend beginning events is with the objectives. Events, as anyone who's ever done them, take an enormous amount of time, energy, resources, and sometimes angst. So if we're going to expend all of that, it's worth taking the time to drill down deep to what action do you want people to take after the event, or what do you want them to know? The way we describe this with our clients is, what do you want people walking away saying, doing, thinking, feeling, or knowing? We strongly recommend having at most 3 objectives. And then once you've identified those 3, to truly drill down on the language so that your team and your organization are aligned on what you want to have happen. You might be stunned, or maybe you wouldn't be stunned, at how often there are competing objectives or hidden agendas that can quickly derail any project. So please take the time to think about, is the event educational, motivational? Is there a specific action you want them to undertake? Why are you having the event? And we view events as communication vehicles, and the objectives are the drivers. So once you've defined the objectives, then it starts time to put them to use. When you start talking about any event element, is it theme of event, the speakers, the agenda flow, the audience to be invited, the sponsors to be approached, and a myriad of other choices, how do each of those choices figure back to an objective? And is it serving an objective? And ideally serving more than one objective. And if you come against a wall, you need to ask yourself about that again. If a choice is being offered, say a panelist is suggested, does that person fulfill one of the objectives you're trying to accomplish? Or do you need to take a look at, and this happens all the time, is the person being offered for a political reason or to satisfy a need external to the event? It doesn't always negate that they should be there, but you need to assess how they figure into the program. Each and every time you make a choice, it's time to revisit the objectives. Does this meet one or more of the objectives, and does it belong? So any other thoughts on objectives? Because that's where we begin. Any other comments or ideas on that? Seeing heads nodding. Do I see any heads like this? Okay, next thing is audience, and this part is changing. So guess who's coming to dinner? First thing you want to be thinking about is your demographics. Who needs to know what you're talking about, or who will affect the change that you want? Is that audience internal to your organization, external to your organization? And using that, decide who you want to be in the room. The other thing you want to consider, who needs to be in the room. Even if someone, for example, may not be able to affect the action you need them to take, there are other reasons, cultivation reasons, past history reasons, to have people in the room. So think about who needs to be in the room and who you want to be in the room. And in the virtual world, I would strongly encourage you to think much more broadly about your audiences than you have in the past. When we do live events, we usually have physical constraints, be it space size, catering budget, decor. Well, we have some constraints in the virtual world. They're not nearly as imposing onto an event. Being virtual, you can include audiences that may have been prohibitive before. A great example is a scholarship program we have the honor of working on every year. There's a local corporation we work with that gives away really significant scholarships to some incredibly high achieving, high deserving kids every single year. And this is always a live event, corporate headquarters, photo with the CEO, all those sorts of things. This year needed to go virtual. When we're typically in a live environment, we can only have a few members of immediate family for each of the scholarship winners. But in the virtual world, we weren't constrained by that. We were able to include teachers, mentors, clergy, friends, grandma in Wyoming who could have never attended before. We did it individually, and it became a personal experience honoring amazing achievements in some kids that are going to change the world. And you could see the village that had had a hand in raising this person bursting with pride and joy. And quite candidly, eventually this event will go back to live. But we made the decision the virtual component is going to stay because it became much more about the individual and much more personal. The other thing you want to think about with audiences is what we call sweet spots and hot buttons. What makes this audience tick and what turns this audience off? You also want to think about that from a technology standpoint, which is something you haven't had to consider before. And I'll get into that detail in just a little bit. And please remember that even in the virtual world, as you do your registrations, ADA still applies. You still need to ask who has ADA needs in your registrations. For example, this is a lovely environment, but do we need a signer or captioning for some of our guests? If we're sending out any kind of materials, do we need any in Braille? If you're sending out any treats, do we need to ask about dietary needs and then have backup plans? If you ask, you need the backup plan, but legally ADA still applies. So please don't miss that step. I've had a few clients say, oh, I took that off registration. I'm like, no, put that back on, please. I still need that. So other ideas, comments about audiences or what to think about, leaving the technology part out of it. I'll get to that in just a little bit when we talk about platforms. Questions, comments? Okay. So also new for these times are agenda flows. How much time for each session each day? Please, I beseech of you, do not do what some of my clients have tried to do. Do not try to take your 8-hour conference, pick it up and plop it into a virtual environment still as the 8-hour conference. Nobody is sitting still for 8 hours in front of their computers. What we're discovering is that you really need to break it apart, and 2 hours seems to be the outer limits about what people will accept right now. Even with a break, 2 hours seems to be the outer limit. So when you're thinking about your agenda flows, think about prioritizing your content back to those objectives. Think about whether you can break it into multiple bites during one day, maybe 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours later in the day with a nice big break in between, or do you do multiple days? Do you break it into, what we did with the Dana conference, a keynote on Monday, some breakouts that follow, the big panel and the keynote later in the week as a way to break it apart, give continual bites at the apple. Also, when you're thinking about your agenda flow, when you think about your speakers, having speakers that have some degree of tech savvy or an assistant that has some degree of tech savvy will be very important. You could have the greatest speaker in the world with the best content that will drive your objectives, that will accomplish your goals. If they can't turn on the mic or they can't turn on the camera, it's not going to serve your objectives. So please reevaluate those. Also, when we're talking about speakers and MC, and we now view this as mission critical. Even if you have not had an MC in the past, every single event you have now, we would strongly recommend an MC. You need someone to make the introductions. You need someone to go with the flow. You also need someone who can think on their feet and leap into action when something goes astray, most likely technology, who can, with our side coaching, come onto screen and say, this is what's going on and this is what we're doing, and please be comfortable with this. but not everyone has that gift where they can just be on. So think about within your organization, or if you need to, external to your organization, who can be that go-to person in the heat of the moment. Another thing in virtual environments, and a new technology term that we're hearing a lot of, is called tiebacks. When you think about it during live events, you really need to just keep people out of their phones. In a virtual event, now we have to keep people out of their phones, out of the fridge, away from the dog, not doing the homeschooling, not in their Facebook. It's a multitude of things, and it's much harder to keep audiences engaged. So there are some standard things in the platforms that are usually used. Polls are great for engaging and for gathering analytics for your own organization. So that's a 2-for-1. Asking for questions, raising hands, Q&A are all examples of tiebacks. But we would also recommend sprinkling in fun, different, unexpected tiebacks as ways to re-engage. You know, we've all heard about Zoom bombs. And actually, I'll give credit to Melissa Hopkins on this one. She and I brainstormed for the Dana conference how to do official Zoom bombs. So the audience doesn't know this is coming. The only one who really knows is the MC, and please only do this with the MC who's prepared. But we literally had a couple folks just drop in as a surprise. We had Dana Herbert, who made the cookies, who won the Buddy TLC program. We had Senator Coons, little surprises, little unexpected moments. And you can also use tiebacks in thinking about content. One thing, and it might sound gimmicky, but it does work. What about event bingo? And the bingo squares are keywords or statistics that you know some of the speakers are going to say. This does 2 things. It's something a little different and fun. Also, always make it with a prize. A prize drives everything. But what event bingo does is it forces the audience who wants to play to listen for the keywords, to listen for the statistics, which is what we really want them doing to keep that level of engagement. So when they get bingo, they just put it in the chat that they have bingo. The only thing incumbent on you is to make the card, get it out in advance, and you need to have somebody on your staff playing along to make sure it's really bingo, and then get them the prize afterwards. Also think about getting people moving. Nothing worse than sitting for 2 straight hours. What about doing a stretch break with some music? If you're working on something that's really stressful or difficult for your organization, what about bringing in someone to do just some quick breathing exercises or just some quick yoga or stretching to kind of bring everybody's blood pressure down, get that oxygen flowing, a way to move as part of the content. Also handouts, send them the day before in the reminder. You can also put them into the chat so there's conversation points right there. But agenda flow, you really need to pay attention to your priority, your timing, and ways to re-engage, as well as your speakers. Other ideas, thoughts, comments on agenda flow or on speakers? Yes, Ariana.
2 questions. As far as speakers go, this might be off topic, but do you have any suggestions for when you are on a Zoom? Speaking to a group of people on a computer is way different than speaking in front of a group. So that's my first question. And then number 2, I don't know what the phrase Zoom box means.
Zoom bomb?
Oh, Zoom bomb.
Sorry. Zoom bomb as a way to, you know, those little unofficials, okay, they've been really horrible, but we can make them fun as a way of a Zoom bomb.
Oh, okay. I hadn't heard that before. Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, there's been cases where people have hacked conferences and put out their own messaging.
Okay, gotcha.
So in terms of, you know, the speakers, yes, as somebody who does presentations, this is very different, and you can see my eyes going all over the place. It's hard. One trick we've been using, and it does help a bit, to actually put a face, a little picture of somebody you love or you like next to that little green light on the laptop as someone to actually talk 2 can be a hint for your speakers. But yeah, it is really hard. Also talk with your speakers in advance. Some prefer sitting, some prefer standing. I'm still on the fence and making up my mind. But does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. Other questions or ideas? Paul?
I heard a session when you're leading a large meeting and everybody knows each other. And like we had people coming in at different times on the front end, how do you engage people? Because when you have an event, they actually go from table to table and talk to people and actually engage. At the Dana conference, you were able to do that because of the platform. We went place to place. But I've also seen them ask people to put up an album cover of something, the first song they ever listened to.
Nice.
And then the people who knew each other got to guess, oh, well, that's Carolyn. I think she knew this song. And then there was interaction in the group, but it was engaging them right from the very beginning.
I love that. I may steal that if you don't mind. Thank you. Yeah, it's almost sort of doing an icebreaker. And that's something that, you know, in the real world we've done, kind of a spin on that, is to have people put up very little known facts about themselves. And then people try to pair up who goes with which fact. And it's really interesting when you see, you think I would do that? Really? Or how did somebody not figure out that that was me? So that's another kind of good way. And you can do that also in the Zoom platform, even in breakout rooms, which you can pre-assign or be random as ways to engage. And yeah, I will get into a little bit of the interactivity later. Other comments or ideas? Okay, next, let's go to the almighty dollar. Budgets, budgets, and budgets. So no surprise to anybody, hitting budgets are important, and especially in the coming years, I think budgets are going to be even more important. But also we are very aware that in the nonprofit world, we have the added layer of perceptions of budgets. Even if something is free or donated, what does it look like? I'm very aware that we always need to not only be good stewards of our donors' dollars, but the appearance of being good stewards. So establish those parameters up front, and please be brutally honest with yourself and with your organization. What can you truly afford, and what do you conservatively think you can raise if you're doing sponsorships? We are huge fans of way overestimate expenses and way underestimate income. That way the surprises go the opposite directions, because you don't want to be in the opposite way where you've underestimated on the back end and find ourselves in it. Also in the virtual environment, please bear in mind, even though we may not be doing venue per se, food, decor, this format is not free if we're doing any kind of significant platform. You really need to think about taking those resources and putting them into production. In the very beginning, everybody was saying, oh, this is free, and oh, this is easy, and oh, this is great, and I'm slashing my budget in half. Please don't do that, because what we're actually discovering is that virtual is actually harder, more time consuming, and can be as much as a live event, or depending on the needs, even a bit more. So all those resources you used to put into those other things, food, venue, decor, should go into production. Because the new things you need to think about are platform, additional production, mailing to participants. Are you doing gifts or hosting? All those things figure into budgets. So it isn't until you've made all of those assessments, objectives, agenda flow, budget, now it's time to talk about platform. And before you talk about platform, it's time to do the second audience assessment. What is the tech comfort level of your audience? And how open will your audience be to something outside of, say, a Zoom or a WebEx? And this part is continually evolving. Shall we say that I think prior to March, there was maybe 300-400 platforms out there, most flying under the radar. There are now literally thousands of platforms out there, more being developed every day. And shall we say that they are all borrowing? Yes, let's use the word borrowing from each other. And they are constantly updating. So the way we're explaining this to our clients is we're designing the plane and building the plane while we're flying the plane. And while we're flying the plane, everybody keeps changing not only the destination, but the flight path. So that's what it's like dealing in platforms right now. Before you even spend a lot of time and energy on researching platforms, the first question after your audience you want to ask is, do you have any organizational mandates to a platform? We are seeing organizations that have mandates to Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Adobe Connects, WebEx, GoToMeeting. We're also seeing, conversely, some organizations that have mandates against a particular platform. So be aware of that, please. If you are mandated to a particular platform, research its capabilities, and then please design your program so it's within those parameters. So example, if you are mandated to a Zoom platform, please don't build in gamification or serious analytics into your needs, because Zoom simply does not have that capability. Also, be aware of your license restrictions. Do you have a meetings license, webinar license, or both? Do you have caps on your audience counts? And if you want to expand those, for how long, and for how much? And when can you get out, and how fast can you activate it? The morning of is not the time to activate that, please. Same thing goes for caps for time, recording capabilities and capacities. And also be aware of security allocations and what your organization will require, and think about what you're discussing. Do the security allocations for waiting rooms, for passwords, etc., fit what you're talking about. Also, if you're going to be recording, make sure in your registrations you have some form of consent that your audience is giving permission for the event not only to be recorded, but by participating, the guest gives you the right to use the recording in a variety of formats. And please talk to your legal counsel about specific language, because I am not an attorney. We're just saying, please get the consent up front. In terms of other platforms, as I mentioned, there are literally thousands right now, but some of the ones we've played in, Remo for the Dana conference, that was primarily for interactivity. There's Blue Jeans, Maestro, Hopin, Pathable, Wowza, the list goes on and on. So as you want to start evaluating a new platform, A, does the platform accomplish what you want it to do? And in the handout I sent, there's a few places that gives you evaluation grids that you can pay attention to. If the platform does what you want it to do, get online, maybe do their demo. Once you do their demo, if it's still feeling like the right fit, now it's time to contact the platform and get a personal demo with one-on-one. Yes, it means they're going to call you afterwards to try to sell you, but get the personal demo, talk through your very specific needs and what you want to accomplish. And before you buy, ideally talk to the platform rep about a way to attend a conference that's using that platform so you can see it from the guest's point of view. You can come in cold, see, does it work for you? Is this the experience you want your guests to have? Some other questions to start thinking about. Back to the objectives. Is this educational, motivational? Does it fit your objectives? Does it fit the level of interactivity you want to have? Good with just a Zoom webinar and these counts? For Zoom webinars, when we're doing something like this, we don't recommend going beyond maybe 25 folks. It just becomes a little unwieldy then. Do you want networking opportunities? Do you have breakouts? Do you have multiple concurrent sessions you want to run? Do you have different technology you want to showcase? How are we going to showcase are sponsors. Can the sponsors have logos, links to their websites? Can it be a rolling grid that has that? Do we have exhibitors? Don't just automatically discount A, having exhibitors, and B, let's be quite candid, don't discount the revenue to your project. Exhibitors are still possible in exhibit rooms, in lounges, at reserved tables. It just needs to be approached differently. Also, some things that, for example, things that Zoom doesn't do. Do you want integrated registration for your event? So it's one-stop shop. People register on the same website that they go to. What kind of analytics do you want after the event? Some of the analytics have gotten very, very sophisticated. They can tell you every single person, when they came in, which tables they went to, the exhibitors they visited, sponsors clicks they did. Do you want or need those analytics? You might want to also think about branding, and I mean branding for you. Can the platform be customized to match your branding colors, your fonts, show your logo, continually remind the audience who this is for and what it's about? Everybody's on so many Zooms. Sometimes they pop into an event because it's on their calendar, but it's the same thing as with a live event. They walk in and go, where am I? Who is this for? Same thing, give the branding. You want to make sure they remember who you are and why they're here. Do you need to record the event? And can the platform do that in an easy way that you can then access or download? And if they're storing it for you, how long will they archive it? Do you want or need to see single speakers, multiple speakers, or does that change throughout the agenda? And are all those speakers in one place? Are we broadcasting from a studio? Are they all virtual? Is it a mix? And this one's key. Is your audience willing to download yet another app? Are they allowed to download yet another app? Or is a web-based better for you? And while you're thinking about that, think about your audience in terms of, are they all behind VPNs, behind firewalls that are going to make accessing web-based harder? And can they turn them off? In terms of the tech comfort level of your organization and your audience, please be brutally, painfully, horribly honest about this. You could design the best event in the world, have the best platform for that application. But if your audience can't get in or is frustrated getting in, it's all moot. And then do you have the budget for these resources? One thing I also want to point out with audiences, if you're going to try a new platform, we can send out tech sheets, testing days, all those lovely things. Invariably, there is going to be one, usually more than one, who cannot get in for whatever reason. And they are not going to be kind or patient about it. And sometimes they will get public about it. If that's something that your organization is incredibly uncomfortable with, you either need to do preemptive strikes with the folks you know are going to be a challenge or make a different decision. Couple more things on platform, so before I go on, questions, comments, ideas. Looking. Okay, onward we go. So also, as you're thinking about platforms, what kind of event is this? And by that, I mean, is this totally virtual? Is every single speaker in their own office, in their own space? And that's how you need to think about switching between speakers. Are you going to do what's now being called a hybrid? Or maybe you go to a broadcast studio, everything, all protocols in place, socially distanced, plexiglass up, just like you've been seeing in the debates or in the conventions. Are you broadcasting like that? Are you doing a divide where some are virtual and some are in a studio? All of these need more production. And no matter which platform you go with, please remember, stay on top of the platform updates. Like I said earlier, they're all borrowing from each other. And if you can from the platform, find out when their updates typically are. We're seeing some doing on Sundays. We're seeing some doing twice a month. Once you've gotten that information, make sure you test before, then absolutely test after the updates, because things change and you don't want surprises the morning of. This won't guard against unplanned updates, but it'll help. Also, in this ever-changing world, just because you choose one platform for one event doesn't mean that's the be-all, end-all for the rest of eternity. The next time an event comes around, please do the reassessment again. Just because it's right now doesn't mean it's right every single time. And as the platforms continue to evolve, what was right before, pros and cons will change. Other questions, comments on platforms? Okay, so tips, tricks, and uh-ohs. And uh-ohs always happen, but we're trying to minimize. We take the view that events are memories, and we're always going for the right memories. That being said, Murphy's Law and or the technology gremlins sometimes attack, no matter how hard we try to keep them nailed in the box. So some things we recommend to try to avoid the uh-ohs. Please get all the PowerPoints, keynote presentations, handouts from your speakers in advance. You never know what's going to happen, and that way at least base content lives in two places, not in one. Also, let's talk about speakers. Speakers have a lot of things that we now recommend adding to their contracts to try to maximize success. Every single time you want to test the speaker in advance of the event date. And it is critical that the test be in the same location from where they're going to be presenting and using the same equipment that they're going to be using when they're presenting. Hardwire internet connection is required. Wi-Fi is not our friend at all, and build it into the contracts. Also build into the contracts that the speakers must be online at least 30 minutes prior to their presentation. Yes, this takes time. Yes, it takes money. When we did the Dana conference, for example, we had to test 28 speakers in about 6 hours. It was sort of like playing speaker Tetris, getting all of those schedules aligned, but it was absolutely critical to check the lighting, check the mics, check the camera, make sure they could share appropriately. One speaker discovered that he had some software that didn't work quite well, so that gave us the opportunity to work all of that out. All that being said, sometimes life happens. For example, a project we did recently that will remain nameless. We tested all the speakers, everybody had their marching orders, everybody was in a good place, we were ready to go. This was the week before. And the morning of the event comes, and 30 minutes out, I don't have one of my speakers. And they've been really reliable until now. And 20 minutes out, I'm calling. And 15 minutes out, I get them. And the panic is leaking through the phone. They can't log on. And they suddenly tell me they're in the rural Midwest with no internet of any significance. We had tested them the week before in a major metropolitan city. Now, in the speaker's defense, they did have a game plan. They had planned to be at a community center. They had worked out a private room, hardwired internet. They had it all worked out until community center got closed the day before because of a COVID exposure. So this poor soul has literally been driving around, phone in hand, desperately looking for an internet signal, forgive me, in the middle of the cornfields. And she hadn't been worried about any of this because she had a game plan, so she hadn't told us. So here we are, and now we're about 10 minutes out. So we tried bringing them on just using full video with their phone. Nope. Okay, let's try bringing them on audio only. We have the PowerPoint. We can show and click along. Nope. Okay, no choice but to explain to our guests. This is where the MC comes in. We have had significant unexpected technical issues. By the grace of God, the speaker was actually presenting later in the week. We're happy to move all of our guests to the second session. And if they can't attend that, we'll get them a video. We did get the speaker on the second session after some significant technical machinations, because quite frankly, there is no internet in the cornfields. Lesson learned. Build it into the contracts. Then reconfirm, reconfirm, reconfirm. And after that, adapt. Technology, as the world is learning, can be very, very twitchy sometimes. And those gremlins do get out. And sometimes you just have to improvise and adapt. If you're doing anything of size, we recommend you working with a production company. We know it's extra money, but truly it is worth every single penny. These guys live in the tech world every single day. We try to stay very abreast about all of the tech and the platforms, but they are knee deep in it every day and have great ideas. So we would strongly recommend that you doing that. Also, staffing considerations. Much to everyone's surprise, you need just as many of your staff to support a virtual event as you do a live event. You need somebody to manage the speakers. Witness what I was just talking about. You need somebody to monitor the chat, and that person needs to have admin capabilities in case for whatever reason, somebody's in there, doesn't belong. You need at least a few people actually for Q&A. You need somebody to be gathering the Q&A, somebody to be curating, deciding, and then someone to feed to the MC or the speaker for the moderation. And that person needs to be really versed in content, in audience, and an organization so they can prioritize. And make sure you set up a process of getting the Q&A to the speakers. I recently did an event where it was actually the hybrid that we talked about. We had folks in Chicago with part of a crew there, and then we had folks in DC, and that was the broadcast point, and the polling comes off of the platform at the broadcast point. We're talking about the polling, and I went, wait a minute, if we're broadcasting the poll from DC, and the audience can see it, none of my speakers in Chicago see it, and everybody went, huh? It's like, yeah, let's fix that, please. Because the poll is great, but if the speaker can't speak to it, just wasted everybody's time. So think about doing all of that. Also, we recommend what we call a first line tech support actually be within your organization, because usually the first line of tech support is the person actually registered. And we deal with that all the time. You get walk-ins at live events. You get walk-ins at virtual events as well. So actually have the first line of defense be to your organization. Is the person registered? If not, and it's appropriate, get them registered, then escalate it to tech support. That will take care of maybe 70% of your quote unquote issues. Also, be sure to engage in advance. Engage early and often. But as you head down to the event, while it costs time and money, you might want to think about doing a mailing. Yes, an old-fashioned hard copy mailing, mailed well in advance. Some people are still holding out their mail for 10 days, and you want to be respectful of that. So it may require multiple stages. And in it, you can put a note card, maybe from your board president or the executive director, an agenda. Think about a tech support cheat sheet. Tech support is great when somebody's in the platform, but if they can't get in, they need help. So we need to give it to them external to the platform. Also think about a treat, popcorn, a cookie, coffee, something that's appropriate for you, or maybe one of the games we talked about, like the bingo. And if you're using a new platform, think about, if you can afford it, giving your guests a day or a part of a day where they can just log in, play around, get comfortable, deal with tech support. And if you want to sweeten the pot, we're back to the analytics, have a door prize for anybody who gets in and tests. Again, trying to make it palatable. Also bear in mind, tech support cheat sheets, tech days, etc. Is everyone going to do them? No. Is everyone who really needs to do them going to do them? No. But this falls into the category of we can say we tried, and then we move on. And I'm sure Jen would say, don't forget about social media in advance, engage early and often. There you go. Promotions by speakers, put it in their contracts, maybe a 1-minute video by X date. Do contests, do live stream interviews, do teasers with photos, do sponsor shout outs, all ways to continually engage. As I start to wrap up, I will strongly encourage you to remember, events are like 1950s television. Anything can, will, and does happen, especially in a technology environment. Most of the time, if you smile and keep going, no one will know, and we will never tell. But going back to have a strong MC who can jump in, go with the flow, maybe cover up a little bit of oops. And also right now, if something happens, ask for grace. Simply ask for grace. People are much more forgiving right now than they have been historically. And I think a lot of people are becoming enlightened to the nuances and twitchiness of technology. And remember that in the live world, things happen too. Cars don't start, planes don't fly, people get sick, power goes out. It happens. Smile and keep going. Questions, ideas, comments? Jen?
I really want to know more about like the exhibitor tables, the virtual tables for sponsors.
Sure. So when we have done exhibitors right now, depending on the platform you're in, you can actually set up little rooms that are just look like breakout rooms where people can click onto them and go in them. We have them staffed with exhibitors. They could even do little demos with their cameras, have collateral, have links. You can also set up just little reserved tables for people to engage. The feedback we've gotten so far is people are willing to go around during the network time to the exhibitors. But you can also still fold in, again, going back to that suite approach. If you go to X number of exhibitors, eligible for a drawing, ways to engage. But you can set up those that way. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. And we actually, we're doing an event November 13th, and we are copying a lot of ideas from Dana's event because it was so good. We're even using Remo.
You are using Remo, great.
Yeah, I'm really excited. But so we're setting up the little virtual tables for the exhibitors. And I think our exhibitors, they're all really small businesses. I don't think they're going to have multiple people, so someone there to staff the table. So if it's just one exhibitor and they want to do other things or go network, or they have to not be, like go to the bathroom, like how do we?
That is, well, let's be honest, with a small business who's an exhibitor, that's same live or virtual. They can maybe just put up a share screen that says, be right back in 5.
Right. Okay.
If they're controlling that way.
Yeah, the only problem with that, because that's, they missed their opportunity to talk to someone, that's fine. But if we made the event game part of the incentive to go visit them, then how do we handle that? Because if there's a game code or something people are collecting.
This is where you go back to the analytics. If somebody actually clicked on that space, it'll be noted in the analytics.
Oh, okay.
Depending on the program you're in.
Okay.
So pay attention to your analytics. Some of them are that sophisticated. I even saw one yesterday that I haven't played in yet, that when you set up your profile, there's a bunch of questions, and then the AI of the platform actually recommends people for you to connect with based on the information you give.
That's like towing the line between really cool and kind of creepy.
A little scary, right? A little stalkerish, really cool, all at the same time. Yeah. Like I said, haven't played in that one yet. Hadn't even heard of that yet. But it's an interesting idea in the same way that LinkedIn or Facebook has those algorithms. The platforms are starting to have those algorithms. Other questions, ideas, comments?
Well, comment. I wish I had listened to this presentation before we locked down all the speakers for our event, because we're doing one big long event. So I'm like, ah.
So you and I will talk later. What else? Carolyn?
Yes. Is there any data on if you normally have a fundraising event and it's an in-person event, and now you're going to switch to a virtual? What's the comparison there? You're going to get 50% less money. You're going to get 75%.
You know, it's a great question. And I'm actually seeing really huge swings on that. So there are some events that are making about 50 to 75%. I have heard of events, though I haven't worked on them personally, of going 50% beyond goal. So a few things figure into that. One is how much history is there in the event? So how much investment, personal investment, meaning do people have in the event itself? How much did you have done up front? Somebody tried to say, oh, this one went 50% beyond. I'm like, yeah, they went virtual in May. They already had their money. I know they already had their money. So that's not a fair comparison. I think 50 to 75% is a conservative way to approach it. The one thing I would caution everyone against, so thank you for raising this. I've had one or two clients say, we're not pursuing sponsors because nobody will sponsor a virtual. That's not the case. That's not what we're finding. Please pursue your sponsors. You can still give the visibility, and we're still seeing those dollars continue at the same levels, at least for now. Does that answer the question? Who else? Okay, so quick recap. Objectives, objectives, objectives. Objectives are your drivers. Even if something sounds really cool, does it belong? Is it part of the objectives? Your audience, and think broader on your audience. We have abilities in virtual, sort of silver linings, that don't exist in live. So maximize those and pay attention to the tech savvy of your audience. Your agenda. Please not 8 hours. Nobody's going to sit there for 8 hours, 2 hours. Think about the Zoom bombs. Think about the engagements. Think about the tiebacks. Your budget, and be honest about the budget. The platform should meet your program, not the other way around. Be flexible, smile, and keep going. And if we can be of any assistance, I'm just going to pop up my contact information, though I think Paul shared that as well. And I'm going to say thank you.
And I would end by saying thank you to all of you for attending, and thank you, Jan, for such a comprehensive webinar. I would also just invite you to make note of her contact information. If you're like me, hearing the volumes of things that you need to consider, Jan does this all the time. And so if you have events and need help, I would encourage you. Our working with Jan has been delightful, and I would encourage you to reach out to her. Any final questions of anyone? If not, thanks so much. Have a wonderful day.